Welcome back to The Haunted Beard, everybody. Thank you for joining me. Today, I want to give you my review for History of Evil. This is the latest Shudder original horror film, and this one tells the story of a family on the run from a corrupt state, and they end up seeking refuge in this house in the middle of the woods. This house is known to have an evil past. So the film is set in the year 2045, and it takes place during this sort of like Civil War type backdrop where this authoritarian fascist government has taken over, and there are these people who are fighting the powers known as the Resistance. And one of our main characters, played by Jackie Cruz, is one of these well-known, high-profile resistance fighters who just recently broke out of jail. And her husband, played by Wesley, and her daughter are there to pick her up at this safe spot. They take her to this house in the middle of the woods where she is seeking refuge until some of her other followers can help extract her out of there and get her to safety. So History of Evil has quite a few issues, and overall, I did not really enjoy myself with this film, unfortunately. The first issue I have is this kind of feels like two different movies that they're trying to mash together, but there's no real connective tissue. So you've got, like I said, this political backdrop, and eventually there are these people that are coming around to the house to try to hunt them and track them down because she's an enemy of the state. But then there's also this sort of eerie, weird stuff that starts happening at the house. And I won't get into any specifics or anything, but if you've seen The Shining, you can get a little bit of an idea of what starts happening. The husband starts seeing things and having visions and stuff like that. And there are these two separate ideas that really just don't come together and work very well at all. And unfortunately, there's not really any good scares. There's not really any good horror elements. There is a scene earlier on in the movie that was fairly well executed just in terms of creepiness. There's a scene towards the end of the film that is a little bit disturbing. But other than those couple scenes, there's just not really anything else about this that works or is very memorable at all. The character work here is nearly non-existent. I can't really tell you hardly anything about any of the characters, and there's really only a few main characters. It's the husband and wife, it's their daughter, and there's one other person there in the house. It's mostly all in one location, and it's just kind of boring. There's not really a whole lot that happens, not really much of consequence that happens. There's just kind of a lot of lulls and dead space. And not only are the main characters very underdeveloped, any of the additional characters I feel like are just very stereotypical. And given the film's political backdrop, it feels like it has an agenda. And it's trying to make a comment on the current political and social landscape, and all the characters who are the quote-unquote bad guys, the fascists, the authoritarians, are just very stereotypical. And it's just silly and ridiculous. And it just feels like this film had this sort of message that it was trying to get across, and that was its first concern. And so it was like, let's communicate this message, this sort of agenda that we're trying to say, and then we'll build a movie around it. And it just feels preachy in a way. And it was just kind of obnoxious because, like I said, the characters are all just stereotypical, and there's no complexity or depth to them whatsoever. And so it's just overall not a very enjoyable experience with not really anything worthwhile or significant to say. None of it really works. None of it feels earned. We're not really invested in any of the characters or the story. And if that's not enough, like I said, the horror element is virtually non-existent. There is a killer plastic wrap in this movie. Yes, you heard that correctly. Killer plastic wrap. So if that sounds interesting to you, maybe check this out. But yeah, it just didn't really work for me, unfortunately. So overall, I'm going to give this thing like a 3 out of 10. I feel like that's even being a bit generous. So anyways, that's all I got for you. If you've seen this, let me know your thoughts down below. I'd be very interested in hearing somebody with the opposite opinion of mine and what you got out of it. Just as for me, though, it's just not really worth your time. But anyways, thanks so much for watching. If you got something out of this, do me a favor. Do not click that subscribe button unless you want to be haunted by the beard.